Hello. Welcome back to another episode of Bitfinex Talks. We have a very special live edition. Today I'm joined by Paolo Arduino, CTO of Bitfinex, and we're going to talk about the impact of the halving. Paolo, how are you today? Thank you for joining me.
I'm great. Thank you very much, Ricardo, for having me again.
Nice. Paolo, my first question for you to kick off the interview is how have you observed the changes in market dynamics, both going into the halving and now after the halving?
Well, I've been an advocate of the fact that, in my opinion, the Bitcoin halving would have not made a huge difference in terms of Bitcoin price. I think the ETF is definitely a much more interesting indicator of price action when it comes to Bitcoin. The thing that I always like about the Bitcoin halving is the fact that the Bitcoin halving is just a clock, right? It's a beautiful reminder of the immutability of Bitcoin throughout the decades, something that was there from the beginning, from the genesis, and will continue over and over. And there is no other cryptocurrency that has this feature, right? All the other cryptocurrencies have central teams that can change the monetary supply as they wish. So the that's the when it comes to the pricing, I don't think we have seen or we are going to see a direct effect. The effect of the Bitcoin halving is spread over years, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you. Uh, One of the big stories that we saw around the time of the halving was the launch of Casey Rodarmer's Runes protocol, which created a huge demand for block space and made Bitcoin prohibitively expensive. Uh, do you expect tokenization projects like Runes to continue? And do you expect them to continue to have this like high fee environment on chain?
Well, it's interesting, right? Because there are many projects that now are looking at uh, Bitcoin main chain for as a security layer. I think Bitcoin is the best security layer that humanity has, and so I think we have seen also ordinals and so inscriptions all running on main chain. And while I'm not a huge fan of that type of activity on chain, I also believe that anyone can use Bitcoin in the way they want, right? I might not agree with your choice, but I will defend it because to me, the ability of using Bitcoin layer one to do anything that is reasonable for you is something that speaks about freedom of speech and financial freedom. So that's the entire point of Bitcoin. Bitcoin does not need people to say, oh, you can do this or you cannot do that. So that, of course, is connected to the need and the discussions about covenants, about adding functionalities into Bitcoin scripting, so that it and with enhanced functionalities you can create proper side chains. But so this is a huge discussion. It's quite interesting, quite exciting because it spaces from technology to philosophy.
Okay, thank you for that response. Another question I have, I guess, is coming out of Bitcoin Plus Plus. You just mentioned covenants. There's some interesting discussions around OpCat and CTV for covenants. Have you been paying attention to those at all?
I've been paying attention, yes. The the tricky part is which covenant, which new opcodes we want to include in Bitcoin. And I think that if we spend enough time, we will come out with many suggestions and many great things to add to Bitcoin. The tricky thing is to decide what should be added, and understanding all the unraveling of the potential consequences. And Opcat is quite interesting because it's fairly contained and small, in my opinion. Um, the main point is that whatever you prefer, whatever you like, taking the decision of changing Bitcoin is quite tricky. We have now many ETFs, many people that are investing and have invested in Bitcoin in the last 2 years that might not like any sort of change, right? People don't, especially when there is this enormous amount of investments. It's not a problem. I mean, I think that there are little doubts about the importance of adding covenants and potential opcodes. So I think that they have a lot of merit. But the fundamental question is Bitcoin already ossified? Will Bitcoin ever, ever have any other change? And I think that for there is a higher probability, higher chances that we will not see big change in Bitcoin ever.
Okay. What new features or technologies is Bitfinex planning on implementing now that the halving's out of the way?
So I think, as always, we are focusing on Lightning Network and RGB. I think RGB is a well-known project that has been developed by Peter Todd, Giacomo Zucco, Maxime, and a great other number of developers. Bitfinex has internal developers that are progressing RGB and doing an amazing job. I think we want to showcase that even if Bitcoin will not be changed, it's still possible, even if in a more convoluted way, to create peer-to-peer Lightning-based channels to allow user interaction not only on Bitcoin, but also allow transfer of data and transfer of value. And RGB is a great example of that.
Okay, cool. Thank you. I appreciate that response about RGB. Love the project. Uh, so, with the halving's reduced supply of Bitcoin and the increase in mining difficulty, do you expect the mining industry to continue this trend towards sustainable energy and environmentally sustainable practices?
Look, I think that there are so many places in the world that are yet undiscovered when it comes for Bitcoin mining. So we are looking to Central South America, where there is plenty of water and hydro electricity. But there is also, Middle East. There is Asia. So unfortunately, we have seen a lot of drive to move Bitcoin mining in the United States. There is, in general, nothing wrong with that, but it's not great that Bitcoin mining is subject to one single jurisdiction and a geopolitical jurisdiction and one basically main electricity grid. If of course, it's not one single electricity grid, but still is subject to kind of common rules. So I think that there will be a push in the future, and we Tether we started in that direction to move Bitcoin mining in different places in the world to give and to create an additional resiliency, because we cannot allow the most resilient uh, and more beautiful currency in the world to be subject to one single point of failure. That is not smart at all.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Uh, Now that the halving has taken place, like what focus is Bitfinex placing on security measures to increase the security of the platform and then also, I guess, be more compliant with regulations?
Well, the regulations are something that exchanges have been used to since many years, and they're always changing and it will always change, right? So also regulators are discovering the digital asset world, and they are applying, they are trying to understand it, and some regulators are creating more favorable legislations for digital asset exchanges like Bitfinex. Others are a little bit harsher, but the role of of a digital asset exchange and cryptocurrency exchange like Bitfinex is to be able to adapt to these rules, understand these rules, work with regulators. We have an internal team that does exactly that. I did always engage with regulators to understand the changing landscape and adapt it to it. You might have seen how Bitfinex has recently also launched the support to the travel rule. That is one of the common denominators of the AML policies that are being set across the world. So and also, if I think about another important, really helpful piece of regulation is what we have for Bitfinex securities. So for Bitfinex securities, we have both a license both in Kazakhstan and in El Salvador to launch digital securities. And I think that is the actual end game for that many cryptocurrency exchanges should look into, because I don't think the future of a cryptocurrency exchange will hold yet another 1,000 meme coins and the dog coins. I think it's much more interesting to work in local jurisdictions and help local currencies throughout more modern digital asset legislation to tokenize their equity, tokenize their debt, or issue debt in a tokenized form and raise capital that can be then traded on secondary markets through tokenized digital securities. That is where I think regulators are making the difference in countries like El Salvador and Kazakhstan that are willing to understand the technology before their quote unquote competitors in countries, to trying to capture this immense new industry that is the tokenized digital asset.
Now that traditional finance is starting to seriously consider tokenization, as you mentioned, the market potential is immense. Like how large of a market do you see being possible in the future?
I think that in the next 10 years, we're going to see a $10 trillion digital asset, tokenized digital asset industry. We are seeing BlackRock suggesting the same. We are seeing other companies and institutions like Citigroup working on a tokenization platform. So that is going to be the game for the technological game for the next few years. There will be the establishment of important tokenization platforms. And what I really love about Bitfinex Securities is that it's at its forefront of this industry. We started with Bitfinex Securities 4 years ago in seeking licenses because we could see already the future. We could see that this was going to be an incredible industry. And working with Tether, that Tether has a good tokenization, well, probably the best in this moment, tokenization in tech infrastructure. Bitfinex Securities then can use that infrastructure to help companies like the one that was recently announced in El Salvador for the hotel offering, but many others that are going to look at this new space as an opportunity to raise capital and to have a global window of investors that can look into new offerings that are not anymore just offered by the traditional banking industry, but that finally can disintermediate our platform can disintermediate the investors with issuers, creating a more transparent process and a more democratic process in order from one side for companies to access to capital and access to liquidity, and on the other side, from investor side, access to great projects and companies to invest in. So that is truly, truly exciting, and I'm really happy that we are basically, I think, the only crypto exchange that started to move into that direction since years. So we have a great first mover advantage that, as we know, in this industry is so important.
Yeah, that's huge. I want to change the subject a little bit. Bitfinex is known for its involvement in education initiatives. Now that the halving's out of the way and we can kind of look towards the future, what educational initiatives do you have planned going forward this year?
So education is really an important topic because it has to be localized, right? So it's almost absurd to pretend that every single place or every single country, every single community needs the very same things. So in El Salvador is a great example of what we can achieve, right? We sponsored different educational initiatives like My Premier Bitcoin, and others that are deeply rooted in the territory. And we think that with Bitfinex, our focus will be more and more trying to continue to explain the importance of Bitcoin above anything else that is being produced by this sector, by this industry, to explain how with Bitcoin communities can liberate themselves from the unfair treatment that they had from the traditional financial industry in the last years. So I am also a big fan of empowering developers and giving to developers the tools to keep building on Bitcoin so that they have access to, or they can build as part of the infrastructure in their own country. They can build Bitcoin and Lightning Network services. So look, it's a long-term project, right? So when people think about education, they should understand that there is no magic wand. It's something that requires basically almost an entire generation of, well, now generations are much shorter time span, but still require maybe 5 to 7 years of hard work, starting from the ground, starting from 10 to 20 to 50 students. Then hopefully these students will turn into teachers and will keep expanding the knowledge in a specific area and a specific country. So that's the way we see it, right? Education is basically a mission, and is probably the most honorable mission that you can have.
I agree. That's very important work. How is Bitfinex planning to maintain its competitive edge moving forward?
So I think Bitfinex is always the place where big whales and big traders can find the deepest liquidity, especially when it comes to Bitcoin and Ethereum. We have seen how in the last few weeks with these important price swings in Bitcoin and Ethereum, we have seen how Bitfinex has been considered a place where there was access to good liquidity for people that wanted to long Bitcoin. So if you could see the chart of Bitcoin longs on Bitfinex, it went up quite significantly because clearly there is an interest for buying the deep or hedging or whatever, right? So there are many traders, but that have different intentions, but still you could see from our open interest on Bitcoin margin trading how Bitfinex is still leading in terms of liquidity in Bitcoin liquidity.
Okay. Another question that I have is, with the reduced block reward, how do you see that impacting the mining industry?
Well, it will become the mining industry being always a game of efficiency, not only efficiency in terms of buying the best miners, of course, that is very important. Efficiency, or so, yep, a miner needs multiple things. First of all, of course, the equipment is really important, but also, as we all know, the price of electricity. So the ability of making a case with an energy producer for giving electricity at a low cost is crucial, because it's important that there are aligned incentives everywhere a miner goes in the world. There should be aligned incentives to make sure that the entire ecosystem, the entire environment is participating to the benefit of a low-cost energy supply. And also the operational part is really important. So being efficient when it comes to mining operations is important, right? So you want to make sure that the uptime and the uptime is maximized. You want to make sure that you have a good speed of replacement of failed miners, because if you have an allocation of a certain amount of electricity and if you are not using it in full, then basically you are losing money. So I think it will become a much more, it is already, but will become even much more cutthroat business than it was in the previous 4-year cycle.
Okay. Is there any recent collaborations or technical innovations that Bitfinex is using to improve resiliency of the platform or compliance post-halving?
So as always, we are looking at, and this is again one of the things that Bitfinex did before anyone else. We have multiple parties that are now offering segregated custody, so that, for example, we have been working with Fireblocks and Copper and others, so to allow customers to leave their assets outside of the platform and still being able to trade on the platform. So that is something that for whom is coming from the traditional financial world is fairly normal. You want to have if you come from traditional financial world, you have a custodian, you have a trading venue, you have a settlement firm. So you have 2-3 counterparties. You don't have only one counterparty as we are used to in the cryptocurrency trading world. And so a few years ago, we realized that that was the right trend, because eventually also regulations will push us towards that, towards mimicking the tech and the custody and legal infrastructure that the traditional financial world is using since a few decades. So that's what we understood early on and have been working a lot on. And also we are really taking good care about our colocation space. Bitfinex runs on bare metal servers in a dedicated data center. It offers colocation, it offers the fixed gateway, and then the fixed connectivity, that is basically the low latency protocol that basically every single traditional trading firm is using and is used to use. So these are, we at Bitfinex, we always research on how to build the most resilient and best trading tools that institutions and hedge funds and professional traders need in order to be fast and stay on top of the market.
Okay, cool. Thank you. I know historically you haven't been the biggest fan of NFTs. I know you probably feel the same way about ordinals and runes and stuff like that, but does Bitfinex have any plan to integrate runes or ordinals into the exchange at all?
Well, I think, I mean, I'm not really excited about those. I think that is a bit more retail play, if that's the right way to put it, right? So with Bitfinex, we try to be an exchange for professionals rather than, although we have a huge retail user base, I think that we prefer to stick to high frequency trading and create the best trading experience. I think when it comes to ordinals and NFTs, you are describing more a marketplace. I believe in companies that have a deep focus in one thing in order to make it the best experience, rather than trying to cover the entire space of possibilities.
Okay, I agree with that perspective. Out of Bitcoin Plus Plus, we saw Michael Saylor announce a decentralized ID project that would leverage Ordinals technology. Do you have any thoughts on that project?
Well, and maybe so I saw the presentation, at least a part of the presentation, but my understanding of the presentation and the technology that MicroStrategy is proposing has it has some centralized parts, right? So we are talking about decentralized identity, But at the same time, there is a centralized infrastructure that they are building. I think that they are calling enterprise-grade infrastructure that is necessary to at least issue and in part interact with this decentralized ID product. So of course, it's too early for me to speak about the merits of what they picked, but I think if I had to design it, and I participate in the design of a decentralized ID system as well, I've been working with the key team in order to build a true peer-to-peer ID system that can be derived from your 24 words of your Bitcoin wallet. So that is my opinion, the way to go, right? So I believe in even for enterprise grade services, you don't need to have a central server. You don't need to have a central infrastructure. You can build if when it comes to decentralized ID, I wish we could be fully peer-to-peer and relying on technology that, for example, we built at with Hole Punch. So it's yeah, and I would need to see the product in action to have further comments.
Okay, thank you for that response. Now we're going to shift gears and we're going to open it up to questions from the audience. I'm going to start with some questions that were proposed by some journalists. The first question comes from Gianluca Grossi from Crypto Valuta. And his question is, BlackRock just stated that they are in active conversations with sovereign funds, family offices, and other institutional investors about holding Bitcoin. Do you think this will actually happen? Is there a chance that central banks will hold Bitcoin similarly to how they hold gold?
I think it's just a matter of time. I think that pension funds, I think that sovereign funds will, I think around the world, many already have exposure to Bitcoin. Many definitely will look at the Bitcoin ETF as a way to simplify this exposure to Bitcoin. Unfortunately, not everyone is yet ready to hold their own keys, and that's kind of sad, but it is what it is, right? We should do probably a better job as an industry to make it easier also for institutions and to make them comfortable that they can keep control over their own Bitcoin. I think in a way, holding the Bitcoin ETF is like holding paper gold, right? Or gold certificates. Is it your gold if imagine you are a sovereign fund and you buy some gold certificates. Is it really your gold, or is the gold is belonging to the country where the gold is? I mean, who knows what will happen in the future? And we live in an era where countries are turning against each other. So I think the beauty of, and if I were a sovereign fund, I would hold Bitcoin directly, honestly, not through a Bitcoin ETF.
Okay. Our next question comes from Zoltan Varde from Cointelegraph. And his question is the halving becoming less relevant for the Bitcoin 4-year cycle, considering the presence of the first Bitcoin ETFs?
I think the halving will likely become less exciting over. I mean, now we are four halvings in, but imagine when we'll be, in after 10 halvings. I mean, also the block output will be so reduced that I think we'll see the crypto Twitter a little bit less cheerful. And it's normal. That was the entire point of the halving, was not considered a marketing event, but was just a clock in the block time that was supposed to be there, and again just has the simple function of cutting in half the block output. So I think when it comes to the Bitcoin ETF, I spoke about it. I think is incredibly important, the Bitcoin ETF, for the price action. Although, as I said, I have my concerns that if it might reduce the interest of people of holding their own keys. And so while for the short term is a great thing, because of course it helps to sustain the Bitcoin price in the long term, we might not regret that its existence, but we might see some weird dynamics when it comes to the actual access to the underlying Bitcoins.
Okay. The next question comes from Gino Matos from Crypto Briefing. And his question is, on every other halving, we see the supply shock narrative surfacing, but we've never had any serious BTC shortage on exchanges. How is this time different?
Well, this time is not different. I mean, I think that what we're seeing also in these days with this price action shows that there is always someone willing to sell. So we have to be careful, especially. No, I don't think Bitcoin needs narratives, these type of narratives. Bitcoin is set to win in the long term. No one, I think that, well, at least for sure not myself, but no one is actually, or no one should think that Bitcoin needs these small narratives about, oh, there are only 10 Bitcoin on sale across all the exchanges. That is not true, and that is not helpful, and that is not needed. I think, eventually every day, every second actually that we go by, there will be always one person more thinking about, oh, I should get into Bitcoin. So there will be a gradual increase in interest in getting into Bitcoin anyway. And that over time, over the next years and decades, will basically completely deplete the cell supply. So I don't have any doubts about that, but I don't think this, the shorter narratives on the supply shock are relevant.
Okay, cool. Thank you. And then we're going to get into some viewer questions. We've had some of the viewers of the stream submit some questions here in the comments. The first question is, well, I already asked you part of it, but how will Bitcoin miners keep mining with lower block rewards? Do you think this will lead to a more centralized Bitcoin for the future? And that question comes from SA.
Well, I think it's as I said, there will be a rush to efficiency, and I think that exploring different jurisdictions and putting different jurisdictions in competition one with the other will help Bitcoiners to also try to keep a hedge, right? So I think, of course, today we are still seeing many narratives against Bitcoin mining, or it's polluting, or this and that. But the reality is that the Bitcoin miners are the ones that are more focusing on renewable energy and sustainability, rather than who is producing energy for refueling or factories. So I think the in the medium to long term, many countries will see, and I know it because we are working and discussing with different countries, many different countries across the world, and they are all trying to understand how Bitcoin mining is fitting in their own country, and so this will lead or end up in a situation where countries will be in competition to give the best opportunities to Bitcoin miners in order to attract Bitcoin miners and be part of the Bitcoin mining ecosystem. It will be an important hedge in the future. Every country, or many countries, will want to be part of the security of Bitcoin, especially if their sovereign funds will invest in Bitcoin. You don't want that all the entirety of Bitcoin mining will remain outside of your own country if you have maybe 5% of allocation of your sovereign fund into Bitcoin.
Okay. And then the next question comes from Jorge Moreno, and his question is Bitfinex thinking on creating or being part of a green energy certifier for a certified sustainable hash rate dashboard?
That's something that we could look into. I think that there are different and interesting products that you can build around hash rates. There were derivatives and options on hash rate that you can build. Definitely, there also I was reading that there are miners interested to trade the how they're called, basically these non-pollution rewards that that you can get. I think that we should, as an exchange, look more into how we can create markets for bitcoins that are, virgin bitcoins that are derived from green and renewable energy. That definitely is something interesting. I know that there is an important premium also when it comes to virgin bitcoins, but I wonder if, and this is just brainstorming here, I wonder how that would apply also to Bitcoin that are known and traceable to be traceable to a source that is only running on green energy. So that is definitely something interesting to explore.
Okay, thank you. Our next question comes from Tactical BR, and his question is, how do you see the adoption of Bitcoin in countries like Argentina, Venezuela, and Brazil in the long run?
I think Bitcoin will be adopted from the bottom up. So I think hardly countries will. Not every country is like El Salvador, unfortunately. So countries will, especially countries that have their national currency, will try to fight the an overwhelming usage of Bitcoin, but that doesn't mean that the population will agree with that stance, right? So we are seeing, I think, that in Argentina, Bitcoin is well used because of the obvious issues with their national currency, and honestly, I think the usage and the adoption of Bitcoin from the bottom up is much more interesting than the opposite, because Bitcoin is a peer-to-peer currency. So being peer-to-peer, it means person to person. You expect it to be primarily used by people without needing the approval of their country, because that is part of the concept of financial freedom, right? You don't need the permission of your ruler to use Bitcoin, and that's how it should be. So no matter what, how you look at it, from the bottom up or from top down, we are going to experience a high adoption of Bitcoin in Central and South America, because it's where in many countries there the national currency is now going down the bin. So it's inevitable.
Nice. Our next question comes from Diego, and his question is, what do you think about having 50% of the mining being done by miners organized by Antpool or Bitmain?
Well, I think that we are going to see also additional work and decentralization of mining pools. I mean, we're seeing Ocean, for example, as a good example, but I think Stratum V2 ready mining pools will keep growing. I think centralization works, until someone loses an eye, and might well be that eventually we'll start seeing problems in deep centralization of Bitcoin mining in certain mining pools. So I think there are great developers, great talent, and people that are starting to create alternatives. And it, of course, is also a game of trust and a game of incentives. But I can see how it will, in the end, there is no way that there will be a huge centralization. I can also see that potentially even countries that will allow you to start mining and use national resources to mine might want to have a local mining pool, right? So because they might want that the mining pool is subject to their own rules in terms of which transactions to prioritize and so on. So I'm not scared about the current centralization of mining pools. I think that it will become decentralized at some point.
Okay, thank you. And then for our final question, do you have any final thoughts about the halving or the rest of the year looking forward?
I think just that we are really always focusing on short-term price action. But I think, as many people say on Twitter, we should really zoom out. we are lucky and to be in this industry. I think I keep saying that we are early. We are still really early, and in 5 years, think about where we were 5 years ago, right? We were, felt like we were still in our we were still not even voting, right? We were completely in a different situation with almost no adoption apart from enthusiasts. Today we have the ETF, and there are so many other things that are being developed around Bitcoin, and there is so much genuine enthusiasm. I think that what will happen also is that in the next years there will be a decoupling from between Bitcoin and everything else in crypto that is long deserved, in my opinion. And so it's just a game of patience and a game of being excited and look forward to what if the how the ecosystem will grow, but also we should try to understand how. I mean, I think that everyone should try to understand how they fit in this ecosystem, how they can keep steering the ecosystem in a direction that is more decentralized and more helpful to the next person. That is the way I think about Bitcoin, is how we can ensure that we can finally win, right? I think the next 2 years are the years between the 4 stages of adoption. First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, and then they fight you, and then finally they accept you. I think we are between the fight you and the accept you, and so we should be laser focused on the next few years, because they are the most crucial probably of the entire existence of Bitcoin.
Okay, thank you. Paolo, I know I said that was the last question, but we had 2 more viewer questions come in. Do you mind if I ask you them?
Of course, fire them away.
Okay. This one comes from House and Money, and it is, what do you think about the limitations connected to BlackRock's BUIDL issuance, and what can Bitfinex Securities do to solve at this point? You think liquidity is the real problem?
Look, I think there is I think that on blockchains are interesting for many things, but not necessarily everything and every single thing has to be 100% on chain. Especially Ethereum, if the entire world of finance will go on Ethereum, the fees of Ethereum will go through the roof. So I think that we shouldn't try to put every single thing on, as I said, on blockchain. I think that centralized exchanges still hold a lot of interest when it comes to compliance, because when we talk about securities and tokenizing treasuries is a security, then I think that compliance is really important. And the fact that you are on chain or off chain, so on a blockchain or on a centralized exchange, it doesn't mean that you can, if you are on a blockchain, you still have to comply with all the compliance requirements. So I think, of course, the blockchain adds a layer of transparency, but also adds a layer of inefficiency when it comes to trading. So I think that centralized exchanges like Bitfinex Securities will hold the majority of the volume when it comes to the entire world of digital securities, just because if everyone was trading digital securities, like imagine trading Apple stocks, digital tokenized Apple stocks in Ethereum, the Ethereum fees will go to $500 per transaction. So I think we shouldn't. I think it's nice and it's exciting that someone like BlackRock is looking into this technology and tokenization, but also we should distinguish the hype from practicality.
Okay, and then the final question is, over this month, we've seen kind of like a significant tightening of the reins in regulations, and we've seen kind of enforcement actions on wallets like MetaMask, platforms like Uniswap, and then also Samurai. Do you have any thoughts on if this trend is going to continue?
Yes, it will continue. So I think, well, the things you described are, true for, well, not true, but are have happened for different reasons, right? On one side you have the SEC, on the other side you have the Department of Justice. Everyone has interest in keeping deep control of this technology. So for different reasons, right? One from the security side, and the other one from the anti-money laundering rules. But I can tell you that there will be always more and more deep scrutiny into what we do, and and look, this also shows how, in the past, many projects that claimed that they were building decentralized solutions. If the point being is that if you are a developer and you are building a product that you call it a decentralized product that runs on chain, but you end up in being the only one that makes money out of it, the more it gets used, it's not really decentralized, right? So I think the only thing that we can claim that is truly decentralized is Bitcoin, because Satoshi never appeared, and the way it is designed is to be completely decentralized. Everything else has a layer of centralization, and so people should start to understand that it's hard to hide behind the finger. I'm not commenting on what happened, if it's right or wrong, but what I'm saying is that people should not assume just because they claim that the project is decentralized, there is the rest of the world, or at least the lawmakers and the law enforcement agencies, will see it in the same way.
Okay, thank you. Paolo, thank you very much for accepting the interview and fielding all these questions, both for myself and then the reporters and also the audience. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you very much, Ricardo. Thank you, everyone, for listening. See you soon.
For the viewers, we want you guys to follow us on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, so you can stay tuned with what we're up to and tune into more lives.